This little mistake inside of Polar.sh can cost you thousands of dollars in lost revenue, and I want to show you how you can prevent and fix it in just a few minutes. So if you take a look at my workflow here, we are creating a customer. Now the problem is, let's say you already have that customer with this email in your Polar account, but they're not registered in your system. If I were to run this with the existing email and running, their customer create API call, this whole thing would actually fail. It would tell me, hey, this is the email address that's already in the system. We can't, you can't create one because it's already in there. The problem is now this will break your whole workflow on your backend. So you need to implement proper fallback mechanisms for that. So let's take a look at how we can set that up, because it's actually super simple. So if we get the specific error, which will have the status of 422, we're going to go and we're going to add a conditional statement inside of our backend. And that conditional statement will have the condition that will be external customer API, response, status. And if that will equal 422, that is the error. We are going to execute a new API call. So let's do API, and we're going to do an external API request. Now I'm just going to save this for now. Now we also want to have our sandbox and test environment. So in this conditional statement that I make to make it easier for me for sandbox and non-sandbox, I'm just going to adjust a few things to make it simpler. Now you see I'm obviously calling /customers on v1. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to delete that. And I'm also going to copy that here, and I'm also going to delete that in here. So I just have the API group for sandbox and non-sandbox. And then when I call the API inside of here with the URL, I'm just going to add a concatenate, and I'm concatenating customers in here, just like that. Now I could add a slash and remove the slash on the URL, but we don't need that. Now that way I have this reusable URL that will work with the sandbox and the non-sandbox environment. And I can use that same principle now to get the API inside of here. So in this custom API call, I'm going to add my Polar customer API. And now we just need to have the appropriate endpoint, which is /customers. And then we can add a query parameter of email to the URL to query based on the email. So let's copy that. Let's go on our backend. Let's add a filter of concatenate. I'm going to paste the value inside of here, and then where I have the email, I'm going to put tokenized text with email inside of here, so I can copy this tokenized text, and then I can add a filter on this one with a replace, and I can look for the tokenized text of email, and I can replace it with the input email. Now this will give me access to querying the email, and that's essentially it. Now we just need to have the authorization. So I'm going to copy the auth token, and I'm going to go on headers. I'm going to push a new header in here for authorization, and I'm going to do API key. And now I will need to load my Polar API key. So let's take a look how we did this on the API above here. As you can see, and it's called Polar API key, and I just had it actually replaced by token, but doing it down here is fine too. I can just do token, just like that. It's template text, it can be anything. And I'm just going to copy this token here. I'm going to add a replace filter on here, paste that inside of here. And now I'm just going to look for my Polar API key, and I'm going to put that right inside of here. And I'm going to save this. Now here's the trick. We need this to have the same name as Polar customer API from the variable. So I'm going to call this Polar _ customer _ API. Polar customer API. Polar customer API. And now if I run this, I'm not getting the error again. Now if I run this again, I'm getting, oh, that weird of a response. Let's see what's happening here. We're calling the API, we're putting the email inside of here. Interesting. I'm curious if the documentation actually is giving us the correct method of doing this. So let's try removing the query parameter here, and let's just try seeing if we can call this API. So you see we're getting response false, which actually could because the API gives us a different format. So let's go under here and do a stop and debug, and let's see what the API is telling us directly. Let's run this. It's saying URL mel formatted input. Okay, so the URL does not seem to be correct. So we have customers slash. Let's see. We have customers slash. Oh, I probably should not put the slash inside of here because we have double slash. I think that was my mistake. Let's run that again. No. So let's see how did we do it up here. We just do customer slash and concatenating that on the Polar API. Let's see if the old API still works, right? With this new change to kind of like generalize it a little bit more. If I run the old one, as you can see, the old one is working perfectly. So now we need to take a look at this API. First of all, let's see if this code block even runs in the condition successfully. So I'm just going to go with this stop and debug, and I'm just going to say hi inside of the stop and debug. Okay, so you see this piece of code runs. Now we need to figure out why this API does not work. So we can take a look, and this will need to be a get record, right? So we had get customer on Polar API. So we're doing api.polar customers. Okay, let's go back inside of here, and let's try removing the replace filter for now. And we're doing a get request. We're putting the authorization inside of here in the header. That should work. We are calling the same API. So let's see what happens when we run this and return the value, Polar_customers API. Let's run that. And it says mel formatted input to the URL function. So let's try debugging this more and more step by step. So as you can see, I can copy this inside of here, and let's just try going inside of here and just hard coding the URL. And let's see if that works. So let's just hard code the URL like this, and let's call it. And I assume the access token provided, we need to use the Sandbox. So I got to do Sandbox API because we're working in Sandbox here. So let's do Sandbox -api.polar.sh. Let's save that and run. Okay. Now, of course, it says this is not a valid ID. Now, the default by querying the customers by ID, but if we have like multiple SaaS connected to one Polar account, this can be a little bit of a hassle. So I want to see if we have indeed the possibility, as the AI suggests us, we could, to query based on the customer email. So let's try putting this email in here, just like that. And let's try saving this. And now, as you can see, it will actually give us something back. So it seems to work. So let's try going into this query parameter here, and let's make this hey at NoCode procode.com. And let's see, I should be getting my customer record now. And as you can see, I am actually getting my customer record, which is perfect. Beautiful. So this is get customer. This is getting customer by the ID. This will give us a list of customers, even though it should give us only one because it's one customer, but you know, not that important right now. So that works fine for our matching system on the back end. And then we can just take the first one, right? Because we should not allow the ability to have multiple emails, but if they're already in the system, we want to take their existing record, right? So now that this actually indeed works, let's see. Let's copy this part here, and let's remove this. And let's try going inside of here, and let's try taking again our Polar customer API variable. Oh, that is my bad. I took the wrong one. I need to do Polar API URL. Dang it. Yes. Okay, so that is my mistake. You may want to use more descriptive naming than I am doing here. So let's save this. You see, it's entertaining. Perfect. So now I should be able to add my filter and do my concatenate and put the URL inside of here. And then inside of this email, I'm adding my tokenized text of email. And then I'm going to replace this with the input of the email. That should be it. Let's try running that again. And now it should do it dynamically. Oh, now it gives us a not found. So let's see what's happening with the URL. Oh, it seems like it doesn't replace the value correctly. So, oh, let's go inside of here. Oh, wrong filter. I got to add a filter on here. So in here, I'm going to add a replace filter. I'm going to paste the email, the tokenized text in here, and then link it with the email. Let's try running that again. Okay, and now as you can see, we are getting the customer record back, which is very important. So now we're getting the customer record, and that is pretty nice. But there is one thing that we need to take a look at. Let's put a stop and debug under the other customer inside of here. I need to make sure that the response is correct. So let's just do like 123 plus hey@nocodeproco.com. And now as you can see, this will just give us the result. Just like that. So this will give us the result. And what we're doing here is we are getting response and status from response result. Okay, so what we need to do inside of here is we need to take this create variable and drag it inside of this condition. This is how we will do the formatting if, because it just gives us the result, right? It doesn't give us items. So this is how we do the formatting if it does not get the existing record, and we are just going to duplicate this and we will modify it for this one here. So now let's turn off this stop and debug. Let's run this thing here. And as you can see, now we are, let's run that in here. Let's run that whole thing. And of course, that customer does not exist yet, so we need to change the URL again. And let's run that whole thing. There you go. And now we need to get result items. So inside of here, on this response, I'm going to do result.items.0, taking the first one. And now I should be able to run this and put the stop and debug under this create variable. So based on if we're getting it or creating it, we output and we make sure that the format is always the same when we're outputting something. Now, as you can see, we're getting response with this data for an existing account, and that is the same format that we're getting as if we would be creating a new account, so our internal workflows are not breaking if the user is already in the system, which is very important, because if you do not add the customer ID, your checkouts can't be created, they will fail, and that could cost you some money. So let's publish this and let's try this function again. I can run this with an existing email in the account. I will not get an error message. That's the important thing, right? And then I can put a new email inside of here and I will get not the same thing. So let's take a look now why this is not giving us the same thing. So we can see response status 244. And now if I run it again, okay, let's see what's happening here. So we need to make sure that we're actually, it's maybe actually the customer, like external, yeah, it's the external customer ID, because it's the same, right? But it's something that needs to be investigated. So let's create a new external customer ID, just like that. Create a new email, and let's try running that. That is giving us a new generated record. Now, if I run this whole thing again, meaning it already exists in the system, it's now failing. So my question is, why is it failing? Let's add the stop and debug again. Let's go on Polar Customer API. Let's go inside of here. And as you can see, customer with this external ID already exists, right? It's the external ID. So now if this customer with the external ID already exists, they should probably also exist, and we should be able also to get them based on their email, right? So let's stop and debug this, and let's go and let's return this API here. And now as you can see, it actually gives us nothing. So you want to make sure that the external ID is already a UUID. So which we already do. So let's go to UUID generator.net and let's try this again. Let's try copying this and let's just test the workflow to make sure it works, right? And now I will try a new email, developer@nocodecode.com with a new UUID. Let's try running that. Okay. And for some reason, it gives us the existing record, because if you do an external ID, it's 5FD, and in here it's 5FD, but oh, it returns the response. Yeah, okay, so it does actually work. So it gives us the response that is creating it. So now if I turn this stop and debug on and run this whole thing again, you will see that I'll get the error, right? And when I now try running this again, it will go in here and it will return the record. So if I turn that off and run it again, as you can see, it will get us the existing record. And now if I get my record that is already in the database of hey@nocodecode.com, and I will put a bogus external ID of hello123 inside of here, because they're already in the system, meaning we would be getting a different external ID than the one we're giving it, right? And we would run this now, and now we would get the existing record. So because they're already in the system, right? And what we would need to make sure that when we use this function into a workflow, that when we give it and assign it an external ID, and they're already in the system, that we use their email to query them to get their current existing ID, right? But usually that doesn't happen. Usually what happens is they're already registered in the system with the existing external ID, but for some reason the server has been down or whatever, some workflows didn't trigger, you had a custom function made by AI that kind of let some things slip through, and now you have an issue and when they call it again and it doesn't link, right? So this is solving that big of a problem where it just shuts down the workflow. Now, identifying the user should always happen through metadata, ideally where you can extend this workflow to override certain data. But an easy other solution would also be creating different Polar accounts for every project that you're working on, so you do not have that problem. But this is just right now how you fix that breaking change, which is actually quite important, because we do not want the workflow to fail just because they're not in the system. We would then still like to do following and kind of like get also their Polar ID and get that into our database. Meaning when I run this, right, I'm also getting the Polar customer ID, and you should always also store that into the database as an additional value for best practices. Or if you just want to use the external ID to have your primary key of the database do that, only run it like one Polar account for one SaaS and don't commingle them, and then you don't have that issue as well. But you still should, kind of like prepare for certain specific use cases, which now we have with this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you need some help when it comes to payment integrations inside of your project, take a look at nocodecode.com. I would love to help you with that to make that process super seamless and easy. Take care.